In 1922, a farmer in Nebraska named Charles Osborne was hanging a hog for butchering when he collapsed. He felt nothing, but a tiny blood vessel had burst deep in his brain, and Charles Osborne started to hiccup. He did not stop for 68 years, an estimated 430 million hiccups across 2 marriages and 8 children, until one day in 1990 they simply stopped on their own. Osborne is an extreme, but he points at a question hiding inside something that happens to all of us. Because a hiccup is genuinely strange. It brings in no air, it serves no digestion. It visits you before you are even born. And the best explanation science has for why you hiccup at all is not in your lungs or your stomach. It's a fish that died more than 350 million years ago. Let's start with what a hiccup actually is, because it makes no sense. Here is the mechanism. Your diaphragm, the big dome of muscle under your lungs, suddenly contracts, hard and involuntarily, yanking air inward. You begin to take a breath, and then, about 35 milliseconds later, the glottis, the flap at the top of your windpipe, where your vocal cords sit, slams shut. The incoming air hits a closed door. That collision is the sound. Hic. Doctors call it singultus. And notice what's bizarre about it. A normal breath opens the airway to move air. A hiccup opens the airway and then instantly seals it. You pull in a breath and immediately cancel it. Almost no air actually reaches your lungs. So evolution built a reflex whose entire job is to start breathing and then stop. That's not a glitch in your breathing. Look closely and it starts to look like the fossil of some other machine. And the first clue to what that machine was is the strange path of a single nerve. The diaphragm sits at the bottom of your rib cage. Common sense says the nerve controlling it should come from nearby, from the nerves of your chest. It doesn't. The nerve that runs your diaphragm, the phrenic nerve, begins in your neck. It comes off your spinal cord high up at segments 3, 4, and 5, and then travels all the way down through your chest to reach the muscle below your lungs. Medical students memorize it with a rhyme. See, 3, 4, 5 keeps the diaphragm alive. Why would the wiring for a muscle in your chest start up in your neck? Because of where the diaphragm was born. In the embryo, the diaphragm first forms high near the neck, picks up its nerves there, and then, as you grow, it migrates downward into the chest, dragging those long nerves behind it like cables. But run that story back far enough, past the embryo, into deep evolutionary time, and it points somewhere remarkable. The muscles that became your diaphragm trace back to the region of the neck and throat in our fish ancestors, near the gills. The phrenic nerve's absurd commute is a fossil, printed into your body, of a time when the machinery of breathing lived much higher up. And there is a second clue, one that shows up before you take your very first breath. Watch an ultrasound in the 3rd trimester of a pregnancy, and you will often see it. A rhythmic little jolt, over and over. The fetus is hiccuping. In fact, fetuses hiccup constantly, starting as early as the end of the 1st trimester. Sit with how strange that is. A fetus in the womb is surrounded by fluid. It is not breathing air. It won't take a single real breath until the moment it's born. And yet, weeks and months before that first breath, the hiccup is already running. That rules something out. A hiccup cannot be a breathing accident, a hiccup in your breathing, because it shows up before breathing does. It is older than your first breath. Which raises the real question, if this reflex isn't for breathing air, what was it for? And in 2003, a team of physiologists in Paris proposed an answer that reaches back to the water. I want to be careful here because this is a hypothesis, not a settled fact. The paper that proposed it is literally called a phylogenetic hypothesis for the origin of hiccup. But it is the most elegant explanation anyone has offered, and the evidence lining up behind it is uncanny. The idea is this. Deep in your brainstem sits a small circuit, what neuroscientists call a central pattern generator. a bit of neural machinery that fires off a fixed rhythm on its own. The researchers propose that the circuit producing your hiccups is an ancient one. Specifically, it's the circuit that our amphibian-like ancestors used to breathe with gills. Think about how a creature with both gills and lungs breathes in water. It pushes water across its gills, and to do that, it seals off its airway so the water doesn't go down the wrong pipe. Muscle contracts to pump. The glottis shuts to protect the lungs. Contract and seal. Contract and seal. Now look again at your hiccup. The diaphragm contracts and the glottis seals. It is the same motor move. And the resemblances go deeper. Gill-breathing rhythms in these animals are shut down when carbon dioxide rises in the blood, which is exactly why breathing into a paper bag, raising your CO2, can stop your hiccups. And a specific drug, baclofen, that quiets these archaic rhythms can also abolish hiccups. Same off switches, same behavior, as if you are running very old software. To see that software still running in the wild, you don't need a fossil, you need a pond. A tadpole is a bimodal breather. It has gills, and it also rises to gulp air at the surface. When it ventilates its gills, it does the ancient thing. It pumps, and it snaps its glottis shut to keep water out of its developing lungs. Try running it in your own head. Picture the tadpole at the surface, then dropping back down, pushing water over its gills, the little valve in its throat clapping shut with each pulse to hold the airway safe. Pump, seal. Pump, seal. That rhythm, the hypothesis says, is the same pattern generator that hijacks your chest when you've eaten too fast. When you hiccup, you are, for a few minutes, running your inner tadpole. And here's why the circuit never got deleted. Evolution rarely throws old wiring away. It repurposes it. That same brainstem machinery, the researchers suggest, was reused to build genuinely useful things. The rhythm a nursing infant uses to suckle without inhaling milk. The fine coordination of breathing itself. The hiccup came along for free, an ancient program that survives because the hardware it runs on turned out to be too useful to delete. So, why do you hiccup? Not because something went wrong. You hiccup because you are built out of old machines that were never removed. The nerve to your diaphragm still commutes down from your neck because that's where it lived in a fish. You hiccuped in the womb before your first breath because the reflex is older than breathing air. And the pattern itself, contract and seal, is very likely the Ghost of gill-ventilation, a rhythm your ancestors used to breathe underwater, still wired into the brainstem of a creature that hasn't touched a gill in over 350 million years. Charles Osborne hiccuped 430 million times. Every single one of them was that ancient circuit, misfiring, flickering back to life, the pond, briefly, inside the man. You are not one clean design. You are a stack of machines, layered over hundreds of millions of years, most of them still quietly running. And every so often, one of them clears its throat. That's what a hiccup is. Not a bug in the human body, a memory of the water we came from. If that reframes something as ordinary as a hiccup, that's exactly what this channel is for. The strangeness was never added. It was there the whole time.